James had always been the first one awake. At 72, he still made his own coffee every morning, walked to the mailbox, and rarely asked anyone for help. Then one quiet morning, his daughter noticed something she couldn't ignore. As James reached for his coffee cup, his hand trembled ever so slightly. He smiled, laughed it off, and said, "It's probably just getting older." She wanted to believe him, but something didn't feel right. Before we go any further, I'm Victor, and welcome to Healthy Living with Victor. This channel is dedicated to helping you understand the latest health research in simple, practical language. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. If you have questions about your own health, always speak with your healthcare professional. Today, more families are finding themselves in that same moment of uncertainty. Why are diagnoses of Parkinson's disease increasing among older adults? Is it simply because people are living longer, or have researchers uncovered something they weren't expecting? A recent large-scale European study following more than 3.1 million people over 20 years has prompted exactly those questions. The findings surprised many researchers, not because they proved a single cause, but because they pointed toward an important connection that deserves closer attention. The study reported an association, not proof of cause, and that's an important distinction we'll keep throughout this video. But before we look at what the researchers actually discovered, there's one important detail that almost every headline leaves out. Understanding that missing piece completely changes how we should interpret these findings, and why millions of older adults, their families, and even medical experts are paying such close attention. For many years, Parkinson's disease was thought to be something that happened mainly because of age or genetics. If someone developed it later in life, most people assumed there was very little anyone could learn beyond that. But researchers weren't satisfied with that explanation. As more cases continued to appear around the world, they began asking a different question. What if the story isn't just about growing older? What if something in the world around us has been quietly influencing brain health for years without us realizing it? To explore that possibility, a team of researchers carried out one of the largest investigations ever conducted on this topic. They analyzed health records from more than 3.1 million adults over a period of 20 years, looking for patterns that had been hiding in plain sight. Rather than searching for a single cause, they wanted to understand whether long-term environmental exposures might be linked with a person's likelihood of developing Parkinson's disease later in life. The results didn't provide a simple answer, and they certainly didn't prove that one factor causes Parkinson's disease. But they did reveal an unexpected association that immediately caught the attention of neurologists and public health researchers alike. And what stood out first wasn't an obscure chemical or a rare genetic mutation. It was something millions of older adults experience almost every day. Yet very few people ever think of it as a possible influence on long-term brain health. That's where the story truly begins. After examining more than 20 years of health records from over 3.1 million adults, one pattern appeared again and again. It wasn't what most researchers expected. The strongest association wasn't linked to a rare genetic mutation or a newly discovered disease. It was linked to something many people have lived with for decades: long-term exposure to road traffic noise. Imagine spending years living beside a busy highway or a heavily traveled road. You may stop noticing the constant sound, but researchers wanted to know whether the body, and especially the brain, continues responding even when our ears seem to adapt. Their analysis found that older adults with higher long-term exposure to traffic noise were more likely to be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease than those living in quieter areas, even after accounting for factors such as age, sex, income, and other neighborhood characteristics. That does not mean traffic noise causes Parkinson's disease. It means the researchers found an important association, one they believe deserves much closer investigation, because it appeared consistently across such a large population. So the obvious question becomes, how could something as ordinary as everyday traffic noise possibly be connected to the brain? That's exactly what researchers explored next. Imagine living beside a busy road for 20 or 30 years. After a while, you may hardly notice the sound anymore, but researchers believe your brain might be telling a different story. That question has become increasingly important because scientists studying environmental health have found that long-term transportation noise can quietly affect the body in ways we don't always feel from one day to the next. The World Health Organization, WHO, has identified transportation noise as an important environmental health concern because of its well-established effects on sleep and overall health, particularly after years of continuous exposure. Those findings, however, do not prove a connection to Parkinson's disease. This is where the Parkinson's researchers became especially interested. Other scientific studies have shown that poor sleep, repeated activation of the body's stress response, and long-term inflammation can influence brain health over time. Because of that, some researchers believe these biological processes could help explain why the large European study observed a link between prolonged traffic noise and Parkinson's disease. At this stage, however, that remains a scientific hypothesis, not a proven explanation. More research is still needed before scientists can say exactly what role, if any, these processes play. But then the researchers uncovered another clue. It suggested that traffic noise might not be acting alone, and that discovery changed the direction of the entire investigation. Just when it seemed researchers had uncovered the biggest clue, the data pointed in another direction. Traffic noise wasn't the only pattern that kept appearing. There was something else. Now imagine spending decades living in a busy city. Every day, thousands of vehicles pass by. The noise becomes part of the background, but so does something you can't see, tiny airborne particles produced by traffic and other sources. Researchers began asking whether those invisible exposures might also deserve closer attention. That question has been studied for years. Scientists across the world have investigated whether long-term exposure to air pollution, particularly fine particles produced by road traffic, may influence brain health as people grow older. The World Health Organization, WHO, has long recognized air pollution as a major public health concern because of its wide-ranging effects on human health. However, researchers have not proven that air pollution causes Parkinson's disease, and the evidence continues to evolve. What made the European study especially compelling was that it fit into this much broader scientific picture. Instead of pointing toward one simple explanation, the findings suggested that the environment surrounding us every day may be more complex than researchers once believed. Rather than acting alone, different long-term exposures could be interacting in ways scientists are only beginning to understand. And that led researchers to an even more important question. If several environmental factors may be working together over decades, could some people be more vulnerable than others? And if so, why? If millions of people are exposed to traffic noise and air pollution every day, an obvious question follows. Why doesn't everyone develop Parkinson's disease? That question has fascinated researchers for years. Imagine two neighbors living on the same street. They breathe the same air, hear the same traffic, and have lived there for decades. Yet one develops Parkinson's disease while the other never does. Scientists believe the answer may lie in individual vulnerability. Research suggests that Parkinson's disease does not usually result from a single cause. Instead, many experts believe it develops through a combination of factors, including age, genetics, overall health, and long-term environmental exposures. Organizations such as the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences, NIEHS, continue supporting research into how genes and environmental factors may interact to influence the risk of neurological diseases. While scientists have made important progress, they still cannot predict exactly who will develop Parkinson's disease or why one person may be more susceptible than another. This idea is often described as multiple small influences gradually adding together over many years, rather than one event suddenly causing the disease. That possibility is changing how researchers think about Parkinson's disease. Instead of searching for a single trigger, many scientists are now investigating how decades of small environmental and biological influences may slowly shape brain health throughout a person's lifetime. And that realization led to perhaps the most hopeful discovery of all. Because if risk develops gradually over many years, researchers believe there may also be opportunities to better understand, and possibly reduce, that risk long before symptoms ever appear. Not long ago, most Parkinson's research began at the same point, after the symptoms had already appeared. By then, many of the brain changes linked to the disease had already been developing for years, making treatment far more difficult. Scientists realized they were asking an important question, but perhaps too late. So the direction of research began to change. Instead of focusing only on Parkinson's disease after diagnosis, researchers started asking a different question. What if the earliest changes begin years, even decades, before the first trembling hand or slowed movement? That single question is now driving some of the world's largest Parkinson's research programs. Organizations such as the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, NINDS, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research are supporting studies that search for early biological changes, improved diagnostic tools, and a better understanding of how genetics, aging, and environmental exposures may interact over time. Their goal is not to claim prevention has already been achieved. It hasn't. Their goal is to understand the disease early enough to open new possibilities for the future. That may be the most encouraging discovery in this entire story. Researchers are no longer waiting for Parkinson's disease to reveal itself. They are trying to understand the silent changes that may begin long before anyone notices the first symptom. And that raises one final question. If these changes may start years before diagnosis, what should older adults actually take away from all of this research today? After everything we've explored, it's easy to focus on the headlines. But the researchers themselves tell a more careful story. This study did not discover a single cause of Parkinson's disease. It did not prove that traffic noise or air pollution directly causes the condition. What it did uncover was an important pattern, one that encourages scientists to keep asking better questions and looking more closely at how our brains change throughout life. Perhaps the biggest lesson is this. Our brains are shaped by a lifetime of influences, not by one single moment. That is why researchers now believe understanding Parkinson's disease requires looking at the whole picture: aging, genetics, overall health, and the environment we experience over many decades. It is this combination, rather than one isolated factor, that scientists continue investigating through large international studies. That message should give us perspective rather than fear. Science is moving forward because researchers are asking better questions than ever before. Around the world, neurologists, environmental scientists, and organizations such as the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, NINDS, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research continue working toward earlier detection, deeper understanding, and more effective treatments. Every new study adds another piece to a much larger puzzle. And that may be the most important takeaway. Not that science has found every answer, but that it is closer today than it was yesterday. Before we finish, let's go back to where this story began, because James's experience reminds us why research like this matters to so many families. Let's go back to James. Like so many families, he may never know exactly why Parkinson's disease entered his life. And that's perhaps the hardest part of this disease. Not every question has an answer. Not yet. But if there's one thing this journey has shown us, it's that scientists are closer today than they were just a few years ago. The latest research does not point to a single cause. It does not prove that traffic noise, air pollution, or any one environmental factor causes Parkinson's disease. Instead, it reveals something far more important. This is a disease researchers now believe is shaped by many influences interacting over a lifetime. That is why scientists across the world continue investigating it with such determination. Every carefully conducted study adds another piece to the puzzle. Every discovery helps researchers ask better questions. And every answer brings them one step closer to understanding how Parkinson's disease begins, and hopefully one day, how it can be detected earlier and managed more effectively. For James, for millions of families living with Parkinson's today, and for future generations who may benefit from what scientists are discovering right now. That progress matters, because science rarely moves forward through one dramatic breakthrough. It moves forward through thousands of careful observations, years of dedicated research, and people who refuse to stop searching for answers. The story of Parkinson's disease is still being written. And perhaps the most hopeful chapter is the one researchers are working on today. If you enjoy evidence-based documentaries that separate real science from sensational headlines, consider subscribing to Healthy Living with Victor. Our goal is simple: to help you better understand the latest health research through balanced, trustworthy, and easy-to-follow documentaries. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and take care.